Hello, my friends. Back after a week off. I'm here in New York very, very briefly. Quickly for people that have been asking, a little behind on clips and all this other stuff. I've just been crazy busy in Nashville the last couple of weeks. So we'll be catching back up on clips starting in the next day or two. So on the Live with MattRad Instagram, you can see the clips, and the YouTube as well. We'll be getting back to, there's lots and lots of clips backed up. Shout out to Francesco, who is the guy who puts a lot of that stuff together. There's a lot of stuff sitting in my inbox waiting for approval. So I'll get back to that soon. Let me grab Mr. Castelli. What's up, buddy?
Hello, my friends.
Hello, my friend, my friends, my many friends. How are you doing, man?
Doing all right.
Yeah.
Chilling.
Your internet. Oh, there we go. You were a little choppy for a second, but I got you now.
I clobbered in tennis today enough to make my friends really angry at me. By the end, like I got beat one game out of all the games we played, and they were just really angry at me. You can tell. Like the serves got a little more intense, the attempts. And I was just playing really well today, so.
It's the NBA playoffs. I just went to my first NBA game last night with my brother. I
saw that.
Jeff. I literally landed in New York from Nashville. I'm here for like a day, and then I'm off again. But went to my first NBA game with my brother and my friend Jeff, and it was a lot of fun. But so I've been watching some NBA playoff stuff, and my YouTube algorithm has recommended me some videos. And I'm from Oakland, so Golden State Warriors, that sort of thing. And there's a Steph Curry. There's several videos, but one in particular of like, don't make Steph Curry mad. And you see him like, people talk shit to him and then go super, super crazy and just make all the 3-pointers and all that. So I just imagine that's how the tennis game does.
That's exactly. I was trash talking for sure. Yeah.
Some people fall apart when they get angry. Most people do. I mean, I'm not as good with most things in life if I get upset, but there's some of those like hyper competitive people that go real crazy. That's a certain kind of person for sure.
I felt really calm on the court. That's what I kept saying. Like when they would get a little bit angry, I would be like, I'm feel calm on this court today. Like, I don't know, something about me was super zenned out on the court today, and I was just not making that many errors.
Oh, that's good, man. How you been the last week or two? We were off last week, right? I don't even know I don't know about time.
Honestly, last week was a bit of a blur all the way through the week. I worked through the weekend, which is rare for me. There's just a lot of Atmos to get done with a tight deadline. So back and forth between my spot for stereo and some Atmos deadlines at the Atmosphere with Mike Miller. Just a little bit of a blur of a week, to be honest. Feeling good, though. Feeling really good about Atmos. I mean, Mike just joined. Like, it's just such a learning curve on this thing. And it's exciting. It's exciting to have to figure out new things. I think this is kind of the first time in our generation that there's a gigantic move towards some sort of new medium, right? Like, I can imagine this being the case when people went from mono to stereo. They're like, whoa, we have 2 speakers now to make things sound wider and deeper and taller. And then some people hated it. They're like, oh, fuck stereo. Like, it's all about mono. That's the conversation we're in right now. And there's this weird stuff creeping up. There's this, Apple defaults their AirPods and their AirPod Pro Maxes. They all default to spatialized stereo being on now. So now when you send an MP3 via text or a Dropbox link, if you have listened to a spatial audio mix on any platform, it defaults that on. So now we have another barrier of entry to understanding mixes. Now as mixers, we have to send to our clients, hey guys, make sure spatialized stereo is turned off, because a whole album was mastered by Dale for this project I've been working on for a year. We're so stoked about, and Alex, the producer, texted me back. It's like, yo, I think I like your mixes like a lot more. Something's going on. The vocals, phasey. I'm like, dude, you got to turn off your spatialized stereo. It's insane that like the initial, I'm stoked to listen to these, right? You have the producer that's put his life into this for over a year. Alex has been working on it. And the first play, he's like disappointed because of a hardware error or a software. I don't even really know. Apparently it's a firmware thing in the headphones. So anyway, all these new things coming up that like, it's terrible, but it's also we need to be, some of us need to be in front of the curb and sort that out and figure curb. I said curb. I don't know why. And sort that out and get meetings with people that we can't have this. Like, I understand Apple and their Apple Music platform being defaulted to that. I disagree with it, and I think it sucks. And it should default to stereo unless you want to listen to the Atmos. Spatialized stereo sucks, but don't add it to MP3s and every hardware. It doesn't make any sense because no one's going to be able to. It's a total mess. So we're living through a mess. So this weekend, like Mike and I were like really back and forth. He found out something on a song that he was doing with Dale that if you turn the volume all the way up on the headphones, it sounds very different. There's like a limiter that turns on the maxes at all the way up, but at almost all the way up. And then if you hit all the way up, that goes away. So that's a wild thing. And I think because of Atmos being quiet, most people are probably listening to their mixes on max volume on them because it's not that loud. And Dale never turns up his thing. So he was the one that caught it. He doesn't go all the way up. So Dale's like, yo, there's a limiter. I don't even know how there's no possible way of a limiter being on that. Like, it must be in the headphones. And some spatial algorithm is clamping down with a limiter, right? So we're trying to sort this out for the whole community, for the whole, and I'm happy with the reason why I'm bringing it up. And I don't want to be griping about it. Like, this is real. This is going to be around for some time. So I want to be part of the responsibility, taking on this responsibility to figure this out, because it's a mess. It's a big fucking mess.
It's definitely a total mess. Atmos being sort of the evolution of surround, but now taking this very cool technology and trying to shoehorn it into stereo and into default listening environments for stereo. It just seems like, there's some discussion on the Discord, and somebody said, why do all the spatial mixes just sound like the stereo mix with a little bit of sort of short reverb on it? And that's kind of what they all sound like comparing spatial to stereo. Certainly the Atmos technology as like if you have the three-dimensional room, it's what a cool opportunity for sonics. It seems to me, and I could totally be wrong, like this is a speculation. I mean, I've talked to a few people that have a little bit more knowledge behind the scenes, but it seems like Apple is trying to basically dominate a new form of audio that will fit in with VR and AR, where they become the essentially the owners and the default for a new kind of audio experience, which right now, like you said, is really screwing up the stereo listening experience if you use Apple Music, because they're defaulting to things, and the rendering of Atmos is kind of weird, and it's different for different kinds of speakers. And if you have the right Apple product, but then they default and you try to take it off, but then it redefaults sometimes. It's just a total fucking mess.
Yeah, I think that it only doesn't work for the moment because spatial audio or Atmos isn't the default, first approved mix, right? Like, that's not the default deliverable yet. There is a chance that could become the default deliverable in our
But
lifetime.
we're talking about different things here, because Atmos, there's no such thing as Atmos in two speakers. Atmos is a system with a whole bunch of speakers. What we're talking about is a rendering of Atmos.
No, that's not true at all, actually. Atmos is the encoder that downsizes or upsizes the mix itself, whether it's for a film or a music, to an encoder. That's like, for example, I have a Sonos system that I bought to test this out. That is,
sorry, you said Atmos is the encoder to an encoder?
No. Is the encoding to a decoder, which the Sonos is a decoder, right? Has an Atmos decoder inside of it through HDMI that downsizes. Say, Atmos can be 21.6.4 or whatever their max capability is. But if you have a 5.1 system with Atmos capability, it downsizes that to the 5.1 rendering. So Atmos is a rendering of binaural, 5.1, 7.1, 9.1, 11.1, 3.1, 3.0. Like, Atmos is now just the encoded file that can go anywhere. And that's why what I'm saying is at some point in music, because that is the standard now for film, is Atmos. And if you have a system that can handle it, it will do it, right? So...
But I thought Atmos systems were, by definition, I mean, I guess Atmos, they're now calling Atmos anything that comes from an Atmos mix and then is rendered to different number of speakers.
But Atmos is just simply Dolby's newest surround encoding. Like
right.
5.1 was.
So
initially.
What we're talking about, certainly the idea of, okay, you've got 7 speakers, you've got 5 speakers, you've got 38 speakers, you've got 3 subs, whatever it is. But so the thing is that you go down to 2 speakers, you're basically rendering something that came from a recording, that there's a stereo mix, but then you take a multi-speaker mix, but then render it back down to 2 channels.
Mm-hmm. So there's what's called the stereo fold down that we can check very easily. And it sounds quite good. It sounds quite good because there's headroom. It would be a different mix. Like I would never just say that's the mix, but if I were supposed to deliver Atmos first, which I do believe in time, that could happen. The fold down, I would do a save as, do a new session, and tweak from there. But you're not changing the outputs out of the objects that are going, out to wherever they're going in the room. You're going to make the decisions based on what that fold down is doing. And it sounds pretty fucking good. In a lot of ways, to me, it sounds, on a mix that I've done in stereo, then in Atmos with Mike, I prefer the fold down of our Atmos mix to my released or approved stereo mix almost every time. And
it's funny. I would say the consensus from what I've heard from people who are not doing the mixing, and maybe there's a translation there, and certainly for me, and I've not done an Atmos mix. I've not been in an Atmos room. I've had Atmos mixes done. I have yet to prefer an Atmos mix to a stereo mix.
Well, you haven't heard the fold. What I'm saying, this is not the same thing. What I'm saying is the stereo fold down of the Atmos mix in the room, A being at a level matched volume. I'm saying I prefer that mix to my stereo mix that is as loud as the producer needed it to be, as loud as whoever, right? That's a different thing. I agree that most Atmos mixes or spatial audio mixes don't compete with the stereo in some sort of energy, placement. That short reverb is a disaster. I don't understand it. They shouldn't be adding short reverbs. We should be mixing in Atmos and doing our own spatial changes and adding delays and verbs to make that sound good. Having this kind of one-size-fits-all short verb, making both our stereo and our Atmos mixes spatial audio doesn't make any sense to me. Also, it's not the same on all platforms. There is, Mike just announced our secret. We have figured that out, how to mitigate most of the reverb effect in the headphones. And we should do a test together, but you should A/B some of the stuff we're doing versus other things that are coming out as well.
But given that we're, okay, so I'm not talking about the various renderings coming from a great Atmos room mix to 5.1, 7.1, whatever. Are people just like the pro Atmos rendered to stereo folks? And I should really just talk to Mike Miller, have him on this.
Yes.
But the other thing is I need to go do an Atmos mix in a room and then see how it translates. I can't in my head figure out, like, conceptually, I certainly haven't heard it yet. I can't figure out conceptually why an Atmos mix rendered to 2 speakers is ever going to sound better than stereo. Why don't you just use the stereo mix and make it sound right? Is there some people that there's I guess there's the argument of headroom. But again, I don't know how much of a big difference that's going to make to me. And then there's the argument that there's some sort of algorithmic thing that will make a multi-speaker mix somehow sound better in stereo than you would do it in stereo yourself?
Yes. First of all, let's answer Matt's quick question. I do think it is for
What's the question?
value.
I didn't see the question.
It's now not there anymore. Shit.
You can paraphrase it.
Do you think they're doing the short reverb thing to offer a perceived value? Quote, this is more immersive. Yes, without a doubt. Yes. That's exactly what they're doing. It's a hardware pitch to move things forward for what Matt said with VR and AR. And that's definitely what's going to happen.
I hate that thing.
Yeah,
it just makes music sound bad.
But let's answer your question. or your statement of maybe not understanding how that possibly can work conceptually. But with the amount of speakers that you can hear and the amount of headroom you have and restrictions and standards, right? There's like a standard for Netflix mixing for TV and film, right? So you have maximum headroom. You can make decisions based on that headroom, right? So that affords you to, EQ more and shape sounds more without coming up against a literal wall. It's not even a figurative wall. When there's a limiter involved to get things to a certain loudness that you couldn't get to a certain loudness without them, there is less physical space. So if you're making these decisions with all these speakers, and you could, I'm trying to make this visual because like I wish I could do this. I want to adjust for the records or something, right? So the room is there, right? We're only going to ever listen to it. 99.75% of people will only hear it in things like this. I don't care about that. To me, when I hear an Atmos mix done well, like I'm saying, the ones that I think beat my stereo mixes, and I love my stereo mix on certain things, I feel the music coming out of here.
You're talking about
more.
In an Atmos room, though. You're not talking about listening on your AirPods?
No. Stop. No. Definitely talking about what I'm hearing in here right now. Yeah. I can hear it do this. You feel it. You feel it in your body when it's more blooming, when there's more headroom. It comes out of the phone speaker sounding louder, more full, deeper. You can start hearing those synths that producers are putting in that are just droning in the background without having to like saturate them and give them some sort of upper harmonics in order to fight through the fucking density of a limiter clamping down on your mix just to get perceived apparent, visuals of this synth that's there. All the verb effects that are in the back that are supposed to be there subtly are heard because you have headroom. Only if the algorithm on the platform, like Apple Music or Tidal or Spotify or YouTube or Amazon, that their normalization is truly doing something that benefits the record, benefits music. Spotify, I would say, is not doing it. They're notching out and doing crazy comb filtering. We have no idea what's going on. Their algorithm sounds fucking awful, and I think it's become very obvious to more people than not that they're losing in the sonic value. I don't know where they are with subscribers yet. I think they're probably very close. Apple's probably catching up, if not taking over soon. And they have the person that invented the wave file writing this algorithm for their normalization, for their stereo mixes, and for their spatial audio mixes. And that guy, whoever he is, I forget his name.
Bob Wave.
Yeah, probably. Works really fucking hard and cares about music, and it's translating. Apple Music sounds very good. The stereo mixes sound the best out of all of them, besides maybe Tidal and Lossless, but Tidal's kind of whatever because the subscription amount.
Can we get back to the spatial audio versus regular? Can you give me an example of some mixes that you really like that you think are better that I can listen to right now on Apple Music that are better than the stereo mixes? Spatial better than stereo?
Soft subject. And I don't know who watches this, so I got to be careful, but I much prefer As It Was by Harry Styles in Atmos than in stereo. And that seems to be the one I get the most text about, the most DMs about, that how could it be that different?
The question, I guess, is there something that you've mixed the stereo and you've mixed the Atmos?
I'm saying that with all due.
We're talking about, those are two different mixers, though, so that's not a format difference. So is there something that you've mixed or that somebody did the stereo and the spatial where you're like, man, the spatial is better?
I like my Gracie Abrams mixes better in spatial audio than in stereo.
Okay,
and I mix both of them.
I will check those out. Yeah,
check out older. Check out older.
Older by Gracie Abrams. I will definitely check that out. I mean, I think everybody seems to be suspicious of the sort of Emperor's New Clothes-ness of this, given that literally every spatial audio mix I've heard does not sound as good as the stereo mix. And of course, we're not talking about Atmos in the sense of having a great system. I mean, I love the idea of hearing things in 3 dimensions. Stereos, surround is an amazing technology, and Atmos is the next evolution of it, and it's really incredible. So I'm trying to say this stuff without disparaging the idea that maybe we'll get somewhere that's really cool, or in certain formats it's great. I think it's frustrating for a lot of people to be like, am I supposed to love this stuff? And maybe we will, and I'll listen to the Gracie Abrams. Well, it'll be in the show notes, I realize. But like figuring out what songs, like when it actually sounds better. I'd be curious to hear that. I have not heard it yet.
I'm annoyed again that I can't see this chat, because the chat has been really engaging for this conversation, and by looking back at the question, it always freezes my chat.
Yeah, it's
Instagram
all right.
needs to sort that.
This is why we have the Discord and all that after, is people will chat about all this stuff. But
I don't want to disagree with what you're saying. It's just like, that to me is a non-starter at this point, because it's here and it's most likely here to stay. So I'm going to care about it.
It's only an Apple, but yes, but it definitely is here to stay.
No, it isn't. It's not. It's not. The binaural is on Tidal, and the binaural will be on Spotify. The binaural is on Amazon Music and on YouTube. The Atmos rendering is the binaural. It doesn't spatialize the stereo in binaural. The binaural mix on Tidal and on what's soon to be on Spotify and on on Amazon Music, which has a ton of subscribers, is the binaural rendering of the Atmos file. This is not, and it's in cars. It's already in there. My Tesla plays back their rendering of an Atmos file, right?
Yeah.
The Prius does this. This is so we have dramatic difference. I'm not saying only in a fucking Tesla. Like, this is happening. So we can have a conversation about it, that it sucks, because it mostly does. But also, I'm gonna just make it better, because I obviously care about audio quality first and foremost. And I'm finding this as an opportunity. Someone has to care about this, and a lot of people do. Like, I'm glad that you and Mike Miller and the people that are focused on it are the type of people. You're the type of people I would want to be focused on something. If there's a new technology and it's going to, on some level, get forced down our throats, I think I would prefer you guys to be the ones out there trying to make sure it sounds great, trying to make sure the renderings are good, trying to make sure that the experience of the music fans is something that people can really enjoy, and we can keep the integrity of the sound of records, because obviously that's super important to me. I'm a fan of music first, and that's the reason that I'm skeptical is not the right word. I just haven't heard it yet. I haven't heard it and gone, wow, this is great. And as a fan of music, that's all I really care about. Yeah, I'm a step aside of that, not necessarily in front or behind it. It's just on the side, which is, it's a deliverable. Everyone's asking for it. The entire catalog of all these labels is being asked to be mixed for it. So we're going to take this very seriously, and I'm going to defend its position in the industry just based on the fact that it is there and it is defaulted on the iPhone. If you have an Apple product headphone, this is what we're hearing. So that is a lot of people. Right, that I don't want to misannounce the number, and I should look this up. I wish I can have access to the chat so someone can Google this right now. But how many subscribers are on Apple Music versus Spotify? I think they're neck and neck. Apple Music is probably going to take over at some point, and I'm behind them because they have always, since iTunes, cared about the WAV file and how things sound. And it's always sounded better.
Yeah.
It is.
Except for this thing where it sounds terrible. But yeah, so hopefully it will continue to sound. But the rendering of spatial audio just does not sound. The rendering.
No. Sorry, no. The rendering. This is okay. Let's take a step.
Well,
no. Let's take a step back. This is important.
So the only thing I'm saying is, when I listen to whatever the default is on Apple Music, where it's not the stereo mix, does not sound as good as the stereo mix. When I switch it to the stereo mix, it sounds better. That's all. And that's literally all I'm saying is, I hope they solve that problem. I hope you guys solve that. I hope that happens. Because if Atmos is the thing, that's all I care about. Is I want the thing to sound the best and not default to something that's worse.
Without a doubt, nobody wants that.
That's really all it is. I mean, if ultimately, and look, I mean, the idea of having various speaker systems like Sonos or in the car and Atmos, and you can do interesting things, that's fucking incredible. The idea that I'm in my car, and you've made a choice with one of the mixes where the synth, the bass is back here, and you get 3 dimensions. That sounds amazing. Conceptually, it sounds amazing to me. So I'm looking forward to those sort of things happening. I just hope that the defaults stop sounding worse than the thing I switch it back to.
Yeah, the default could be a stereo mix with spatialized stereo on it, though, and of course
Totally.
that's going to sound worse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if people start
mixing
mixing
Atmos mixes too, like I've definitely listened to Atmos.
If people start mixing, we'll stop there. I think that's enough Atmos talk.
Yeah, we've done that. And by the way, the other thing that's interesting about this, and we have a whole section on the Discord, and there's lots of good discussion about it. It's certainly not going away. It's certainly here to stay. I don't know to what extent it will take over. Maybe it takes over everything. But it's certainly something that we will continue to talk about because it's confusing to a lot of people. It's a bit confusing to me. There's going to be more developments. It's almost like something we should talk about every month or two, because things will continue to adjust. Things will continue to change. People will get better at it. The renderings will get better. Whatever all the terminology is.
It's changed. It's changed a lot in the past 6 months.
Than the first shit I heard. I'm sure it's getting better now. And when I'm back in LA, I keep missing. I was going to go with TZ. I was going to go with you. I need to go hang out with y'all and Mike Miller's spot and maybe Atmos mix some stuff.
Let's do a three-way with Mike on Live with Matt Rad in the next couple of weeks.
Well, I think the thing that I really need to do is I need to go sit in an Atmos room and like listen to some shit first. Because you said you're a side for you're much further ahead of me in the process of simply I've literally never been in an Atmos room. So all I'm doing is listening from the pure consumer standpoint. Which is, I think, part of why these discussions are good is you and I have different experiences and different perspectives on things. And I'm only coming from the standpoint of consumer when it comes to Atmos. So it would be good for me to get my head in it a bit more, and understand the process and sort of what the intention is. Excuse me.
Yeah. And I guess I'm on the side of I need to try to do my best to get the consumer, whether it's you or a billion other people that have access to it, to have as good of an experience that they can in that medium. If it's going to be
just me. I don't care about anybody else. Just make it sound good in my ears.
Oh, honestly though, like let's end on this because less than 1% of people will ever get to do this. But if you hear a great Atmos mix or spatial audio mix in the room,
oh, let's go.
There's just nothing like it right now. Like oh my God.
That part I'm fully on board with the idea that
the sensation of
multi-track in 3
stereo, and it's just crazy. Like going from here to everywhere. Man, it's like I'm a kid. It's like
no. Look, I mean that sounds very exciting. I look forward to continuing to talk about it because I think it's an important topic, and it's definitely something that there's a lot of. It's the topic that the most people go, hey, people are almost like hesitant to ask questions because there's a lot of people, rightfully, someone like you sitting in the room going, this is an amazing experience. And you come talk on these lives and you go, this is an amazing thing. And all other people's experiences are these like sort of reverby versions of stereo mix. They're like, but Jon Castelli, who I trust, says this is the most amazing thing and it's the next thing, but it doesn't sound.
I don't think at the moment. I don't want to be caught that way.
But people are conflating two things, which is you being in the room, getting to use the stems on something you've mixed and working in 3 dimensions is legitimately incredibly exciting, I am sure. And then people are going, but he said it's not the same. Anyway,
but the responsibility that I'm trying to vocalize is making that experience as close to this as possible. When we do a mix, this is what I listen to it on. I don't listen on the AirPod Maxes because not as many people have them. I have. We started doing
those are the over-the-ear ones?
The over-the-ear ones. I have those. They sound amazing. I actually really, really get behind them. But this is how most people are going to hear it. So, therefore, this is what I care about. So if it doesn't translate to that, then I'm not doing my job right. And I think that's what I'm trying to get across is, I can have that amazing experience and Mike can and our team can and we're in the room and our fiance and our girlfriend can. Like, we can have that experience. My dad has, been in the room at this point because he came to visit and my mom. Like, they can have that experience, but I want that same sensation to occur. And I truly think, not based on the spatial audio reverb spatialization of things, because I think that is detrimental to the process, but having the headroom and having space to make things seem as if, I'm not talking about spinning things around your head. I could care less about that. turn off head tracking when you're listening, everybody. Like, maybe for video games, but head tracking goes off on everything, right? Very clear. But you can give the sensation of being closer to inside the mix instead of just looking at it in front of you. Stereo is very in front when you do it right, and spatial can actually. So when I'm panning things backwards into the room, to me, it's doing this in spatial. It's not doing this. I don't feel that. That's not, so let's get that off the table. I'm not saying that if I put a piano behind my head in the room that it's going to sound like it's behind. That's not what spatial audio was doing at all. There's no sensation of spinning around the head fully. There's subtle versions of what that panning could do. Spatial audio also doesn't translate well for the height things. It really just makes things sound even more immersive and wider when done correctly. And by correctly, I mean testing and listening to what things do when you put them in different speakers in an individual instrument. Where does that wind up in spatial audio?
I look forward to being convinced that you can get that multi-speaker Atmos Studio experience in stereo. I have not heard that yet, but I hope that you and Mike Miller and the other sonic geniuses that are out there are on the case, because if you can do that, that'll be incredible. On the case. What do we got? What do we got today? All right, what do we got? 30 minutes in. There's a lot of people who wanted us to talk about Atmos for a while, okay. And so I think they're very happy with the 30 minutes of Atmos talk. Cool. Okay, I'm sure the Discord will go crazy after this. Let's see. We could do a couple of quick ones. Actually, this is not a quick one. No, I'll do that one second. Somebody asked, we've never had this question before, and I think it's a really simple answer probably, but I'll let you speak on it. Open Doors asked, what is the approach you have when mixing a record with a sample? Do you resist changing it much because it's already the way it's supposed to be? Do you just treat it like another instrument? The only couple of times I've done that, I've also been producing, so it's kind of sonically exactly where I want it to be. Do you just treat it like another instrument? Do you focus on it different if it's a song, drums and a sample, something like that?
That's a good question. I'm actually, let's keep it in Atmos territory now, because I'm remixing the Free Black album for Black that I mixed in stereo years ago in Atmos, and most of the tracks are a sample, drums, 808, and a vocal or two. And I'm realizing that you have to do a lot more work in Atmos to make that translate. And so there's a bit more work on the sample to be done to saturate it more and give it more body. Like it's not filling up the space as much as like if you had a bunch of synths that you could pan through an Atmos mix to give that. But in stereo, I tend to leave it where it's at from the producer, but that's not to say that like what I'm doing to the overall mix isn't affecting it in some way. I do attempt to put my VLCs, my tubes, or the Unfair Child on it to see if some extra tube love will make it feel a bit more full. Sometimes the sample rip isn't of high quality, so I'm trying to add in some of those lower harmonics, those fundamentals that might not be there. Are there drums in the sample? How am I treating the drums in the sample versus the added kicks and snares? Are they in phase? Are they flamming? Am I trying to nudge things just enough where it's not changing the feel, but I'm changing the phase of things to keep it knocking? What are the drums like in the sample versus the added? Are they bringing tone to the drums? Are the samples just reinforcing the knock and the tone comes from the sample? Are there enough chordal harmonics in the sample? One thing I did for this album, I was just talking about that Alex and I were mastering with Dale that I mentioned earlier. One of the samples, the bass line is in the sample only, and it's not really prominent. So once you get the drums knocking, the bass in the sample isn't competing with the drums enough. Like it's not. So I'm doing like a hyper low end EQ on the sample in order to get the bass to come out, and that's doing weird things with the rumbles and then the drums. Right. So there's issues there. But a lot of the times those things are sorted. I mean, Alex did his best. I just was trying to get the drums to knock even harder on this record. So we actually wound up going more, and I just got the master and it sounds incredible, more old school on that one, more like a Wu-Tang type mix where the drums actually aren't knocking and the sample is driving it. And we wound up coming to a point where I just wound up lowering the drums a bit and letting the sample be the leader with the bass, because the bass line was the star. I think I took a bad approach to that, or the wrong approach, not a bad approach, to that, where I thought the drums should hit more modern like the rest of the album. But this one was a different kind of beast. So I wound up treating the sample first and then like just supporting with the drums. And you know, so this is all just different approaches depending on what you're hearing, right?
Yeah, I guess it's figuring out, the short answer is probably, what is the sample doing in the song? Because if it's a full band, or it's got both percussive and chordal elements, or if it's got bass as well as high end, if it's a vocal sample that's answering the lead vocals, you're going to treat it slightly differently depending on what you do, what it's complementing, what it's how it's adding up with the track. So I guess it sounds like it's quite a range. I mean, the challenge with a sample is that you can't pull it apart. So you can't turn up the drums in the sample or turn down the vocals or whatever. So you're stuck with a certain amount of things. But yeah, that's interesting.
I would add on that note what you just said. Also, don't be afraid of splitting it into sections for different parts of the song, right? So if there's a lot of times the sample has a vocal in there and they're using like a background vocal, like a classic group 3-part harmony background vocal is used a lot in samples, right? Maybe when that part comes in, you put that on a new track and you dupe it and filter out only that important bit and see if you can massage that in there, or you treat that and you filter low end out of the second one. You can obviously use automation instead of, I'm talking about, I like to split out more than I like to use automation on things like that, but you can do it however you want.
Me too. You got enough tracks in Pro Tools.
Yeah, but just consider section to section what the sample is doing, like Matt just said, and treat it accordingly. Just because you did it to one part doesn't mean it has to be done to the other part.
Yeah. That's a good answer. Let's see. There's a couple like big ones. This question was asked in 2 different ways this week, so I thought it would be cool. I don't know if we must have talked about this in the past, but it's a good question, and I always like. Tyler, let's see. Oh, sorry, Tyler. We're not going to get to your question. Maybe we will. See, Zach asked, what's something you wish you knew earlier in your career? Sleeman asked if you could give yourself one piece of advice when you were starting out, what would it be? So this sort of like, it's a common question. I always think it's valuable. A lot of people talk about it, is what would you tell your, early in the career self? What's the thing that you wish you knew earlier? I mean, I don't know. You got anything off the top of your head? There's a couple ways to answer. We could sort of the life stuff of like, don't stress out so much, only do things you love.
Take things less personally.
That's a pretty good one. I mean, a lot of the big advice for going back to younger self is like, just enjoy yourself more and don't stress out so much. It really is mostly that kind of shit. I think I was thinking about this. Go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say, I think, and I don't know, I was thinking about the answer and I don't know actually how to verbalize it. So I'm just going to kind of word vomit and see what happens. Something about being honest with yourself about what you're good at, and then either trying to improve the things you're not as good at or collaborating with people that are good at them. I think that is one of the biggest things in terms of the communal success of making music, is finding people around you who do the things that you don't do that you work well with. Because, as we've talked about before, Jon, you really come into your own and become a hugely successful mix engineer, but you started out doing a number of different things. I started out doing a number of different things, and I still do a number of different things. And so figuring out what kind of person you are, what your habits are, what kind of people you like interacting with, and then finding the people that really complement you. And this is kind of a macro meta skill of being able to pick good people, not getting deep into business with people that aren't trustworthy or aren't going to be reliable. Nobody's perfect at this. I've been imperfect I've tried to do lots of work with people I like personally, but turns out they're not good business decisions. That's happened a lot. There's such a low percentage success rate when you're starting out of the people that are going to really make it big if you're a writer or producer. So you're going to work with a lot of people and a lot of the stuff's not going to get anywhere. But being smart about your decisions of the people, your first man. A lot of people get screwed in their first publishing deal, or they have a bad manager, they have that sort of thing. I somehow avoided that. And I think part of that was I made some of those mistakes when I was like 15, and I got those out of the way. And I realized it's really important to be in business with people that are trustworthy. If you're going to pick a manager or pick an attorney, don't pick them just based on your conversations with them. Pick them based on the opinions of a bunch of other people. Ask around about people. Try to get good information. I think a lot of the people that make records and do some version of what we do are generally introverts that spend a whole lot of time by themselves making stuff and may not have the social skills or the business acumen or the desire to deal with it. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Frankly, it makes me uncomfortable. Initially it made me uncomfortable to do this and talk on the internet. Like, doing the things that make you uncomfortable is a part of this process. But learning how to pick good people to collaborate with, to do business with, is probably the thing that I see people earlier in their career not do a great job with the most. And it doesn't really apply to me because I think I got through a bunch of that stuff, but figuring out who to work with is almost more important than whatever exactly you're doing. It's a very like startup mentality. Who you work with is more important than what you're working on, because ultimately what you're working on is going to change dramatically. But if you're with interesting people that push you, that are trustworthy, that are hardworking, that motivate you, that excite you, that inspire you, that's how you're going to have the most career success. And I see a lot of people who have a lot of talent. I mean, look, like, part of this process is demystifying, like, you don't need fancy tools. You can make stuff on your laptop. Everybody's got the same plugins. Yeah, we like talking about particular saturators and whatever, but you can, the best record makers could do it with almost anything. Dave Grohl could take a little kid's drum kit, as that YouTube video shows, where he just shreds on a kid's drum kit, or an amazing guitar player can play a shitty guitar. John could take a laptop with whatever the lowest version of Pro Tools is and the stock plugins and make a great mix. Like, the skill set is important, but the technical skill set, but the macro skill set of picking good people and collaborating with great people, I actually think is far and away the most important thing. So it's not really advice to myself, but it's advice, I guess it would be advice to my younger self, but really advice to other people is like, learn how to pick good people and choose wisely who you spend lots of time with. Does that work? You agreed? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. Kind of on the same wavelength, we will do Tyler's question. When did you experience the most rapid period of growth in your career?
Great question. I probably have a few of those.
You want to go? Because I think that's the answer is about, yeah, go. There's not one time.
No, there's not one time. I can think of 3 times that happened. And all the times, the first time was when I was in Long Island and had my studio, and people started coming to work. And when they were telling me that what we were finishing was the thing that was going to be heard by a bunch of people, and put it on iTunes or whatever. And like, here I am just being a kid and trying to figure out how to actually record and make things sound good. And people are like, no, this is what it needs. It needs to sound great. And it's going on Apple, it's going on iTunes. So, show up. So I forced myself to show up every time.
Was it the pressure? You think it was the pressure of that? Because what I like about this,
it's always the high stakes. People are counting on you to do that. Then the second time was when Tony asked me to come work with him, and whatever he put in front of me first, I don't remember what it was exactly first, me wanting to impress him and, make him want me to stick around. And I thought those stakes were high because I knew the possibilities of things that we could work on together. Well, I guess Lady Gaga was the first thing we worked on together. So the stakes are automatically high. And I went over and over and redid before I would show him a thing, and like went off my instincts and, made bolder moves than maybe I'm doing even today. Like just to show up, just to prove, there's a lot of having to prove yourself. And then the third time was, leaving Tony and having to do it for myself to prove to myself that all these high stakes records that are now coming to me solely, I'm capable of delivering at the highest level. And then the fourth time was after I had my first hit song with Talk, that I got 300 plus songs within the next year. And I had to have output at a level that I've never had. output. So if you're getting the pattern, it changes regularly when the stakes get higher. So you're having rapid growth based on the expectations of others on you.
That's a great answer. It's very much how my answer is going to be too. I actually wasn't even going to think of specific times, although I could name a bunch of them, but it is exactly that. And it's irrespective of age and skill level and whatever. My most rapid growth has always come when I have a intense commitment to what I'm doing. Like I'm falling asleep and waking up thinking about it. And that's usually due to the stakes are very high. Like I have a big opportunity, the first couple of One Direction things, when I first started working for Eric Valentine, when I was, I don't know, there's lots of examples of that stuff. And it's actually part of the reason that I've gone nomadic for the last little bit is because it's got me a little more stressed out and a little more focused, and the stakes feel higher. I'm less comfortable in my studio environment. So I'm focusing more, I'm working harder. That's, I think, and it's, again, getting back to it, most of the people that watch this stuff are people that are either professionals or trying to be professionals at the highest level. And that is certainly what it takes, is getting into the place where you have high stakes, high pressure, and you're really focused on what you're doing. I also don't recommend it for everybody because it's incredibly stressful. The idea of having like a sweet balance for your career for decades when you're starting out is just unlikely to get you to the place that we are. I mean, it's taken a lot of stress and a lot of focus and a lot of like, oh my God, I have this crazy opportunity. I'm going to spend I got to get this right. And you do that for days or weeks or months or whatever. And that's where the rapid growth comes in. And it makes sense. I mean, all the cliches of pressure makes diamonds and all that kind of stuff. If you can put yourself in positions where there is a high pressure situation, lots of stakes, it will focus your brain and then you will work really hard. That's always when I've had the most growth, for sure.
Yeah. I love that question. I'm still thinking about Atmos being another one, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's so many examples, even probably outside of career, that this, I want to keep this more specifically about career, but think about that outside for people that are having kids, for people that are challenging, like an addiction that they've had. And, there's so many examples of what high stakes looks like, and what growth has to be had in order to make it work, instead of floundering and giving up or, whatever, there's so many examples of this.
Yeah. Dylan asked a great question that I think might apply a bit more to me, but I'm curious your thoughts. You've been on all sides of this as well. Any tips on forecasting the timeline of projects? Mixing is a longer one. Mixing has a much more linear timeline, which makes it easier to schedule. Writing, production can vary widely. How do you deal with this as a producer balancing multiple projects? Do you have just generally from the mixing side, I assume it's fairly easy to say, I can get this done at this time, but sometimes maybe you miss deadlines. Do you give yourself a little more time when telling people when things are going to be back? Obviously, there's last minute projects. Do you have a general...
I've never missed a deadline by it being my fault, ever. It's always like a missed file. And if someone says, can you get it done by this? And I say yes, then the agreement is shaken upon, whether verbally or physically, and it will get done in that time. So don't bite off more than you can chew. Take it from me. I bite off a lot, but I'm an eater. I chew, and I'm a survivor, and I've survived this long, and I'm going to continue to do that based on my reputation of being pretty quick, unless I'm on a vacation or something. Other than that, I'm here to get things done for you in the shortest amount of time because I understand what it means to be excited and have anticipation from the start in the room to the end of the day, bounce all the way to the final mix, right? That's and the master, but that's my bread and butter. That's what I'm stoked about. Like, how do we guide people through from the beginning to the end of the process? That's the producer's job. I take that on equally as important once it's in my hands to finish the master with Dale or whoever. But the producer's hand is to guide and hold the hand of the artist and the label and the manager through, right? I'm sure you can attest to that. That's your job. Yeah. And I love that as well. I'm not a producer in that sense anymore, but I would love that responsibility to executive produce and mix something one day, or have someone say like, hey, can you give final comments on the productions along with the label, whether that's an A&R position or just a, consulting position by friend ask, just to have a once over before we mix the record. Like, that's my dream. That's what I would like to do when I get older, I guess I would say.
Well, so, and it's a good answer on the mix side. That's why people like Jon get hired. And I've talked about this with people like Serban and other folks I've worked with. The reliability, consistency, delivering when they say they're going to deliver is a big part of why mix engineers get hired. From the producer-writer standpoint, to Dylan's question, it is difficult. I mean, I work on a project with an artist. I, was with an artist out in London for a week, and we're going to do 3 songs. And the immediate question is, when can I hear things by? And there's no way to know exactly what that is. I try to be very communicative. I've certainly, quote unquote, missed deadlines when I say, like, it's a Tuesday, I'll get it to you the following Friday, we'll have roughs. But I always say I should have them by the end of next week. And then as I'm going through them, I'll sometimes just give some communication to say, here's where I'm at. I'm getting close. If it becomes Wednesday of next week and I go, I'm going to need a couple more days, I'm going to get it to you over the weekend, then I should probably deliver it over the weekend. But yeah, writing and producing, the expectations, it's really important to manage them. And it's hard to give an exact answer for something like, if you're writing songs with somebody, you can't just be like, hey, we have nothing today, we're going to write songs tomorrow and we'll have the single by Friday. It's just incredibly difficult to predict that perfectly. But the way you mitigate that is by having consistent communication. Say, hey, we had a great day today, we got a good idea, we still need to do a little work, we're going to try to cut some vocals, or we didn't really get anything today, but we're digging into whatever it is. Like, if you can have that communication with the team as the producer, as the person who is really, like you said, the producer in the old school sense, not just the person making the track, but the person who is tasked with the responsibility of being the adult in the creative process, who's going to report back to the label or the management or whatever. Communication is a huge part of that. And I actually, back to what we were saying before, that's what really separates the people who can make good sounding stuff from the people who get hired over and over. I get hired a lot where they go, hey, can you do this in the next 48 hours? And I go, yes. And then I get it done. So if that's the case, I always get it done. So it's a range. I think it's a range of expectations. It's a range of things, but communication, and when you say you're going to do something better, then we'll do it.
I think there's 2 contexts to tease out in what you're saying, just briefly, which would be if you're writing with different people throughout a week or a month, or if you're locked in with someone for weeks or a month, right? So if you're a producer and you're making an album with an artist and you have a month lockout to see what happens in that month, you obviously have more time to work on a song to get it to completion, where the artist is like, oh, well, we wrote 3 songs this week, now let's take next week to finish this one song because this is the best song of the 3 that we wrote last week. Let's finish this as a single or a contender, right? So there's a different context that's a little bit more, the expectations are different. You're not allowed to go work with anybody else because you're locked in with them for a week. So therefore, you're not going to have this expectation from 3 other artists, hey, where's my song, when you're writing with other artists at the same time. Now, that context is also very common with producers. When I was producing in the room, that's a conversation I was always having with a new producer, which is, I'd only be writing and producing for 2 or 3 days a week and finishing the records on the other 2 or 3 days of the week.
That's how I work.
And that's how I imagine you work. So I wanted to just specify the 2 different contexts of what we're talking about. Otherwise, I completely agree. I think that that's what gives the spice of life is communication on all fronts in order to make everybody happy and everybody feel like their priorities based on parameters that you've set for your creative freedom to also exist, right? That everybody wins that way. But communication is the only way that works.
Yeah, and I'll say one other thing. The end of Dylan's question was, how do you deal with this as a producer balancing multiple projects? And like you said, if you're locked in with somebody, it's much easier to say, cool, we're going to work for 3 weeks, then give me a week to finish productions and I'll get demos the following week or something like that. When you're working on lots of different things at once, that juggling, again, I think is what makes a lot of successful people successful, is they are able to successfully juggle those projects, manage the expectations. And by the way, of course, all the personalities are going to be different from project to project, both the artist, the A&R, whatever your collaborators are, whoever the stakeholders are, whoever the other writers are. And so each project has to be managed a little bit differently. And again, I think that is the real skill of a producer in the old school sense, is the person that no matter what the personality is of the project or what the type of project is or what the timelines are, whatever, they're the person that folks rely on. They just go, are we good? And the person goes, yeah, we're good. It's going to be like this and this and this. Really just like being the adult in the project. So that's the sort of meta skill that I think is the most important. Maybe we'll do one more question. I like this one because I think about this a lot when writing, but I guess I thought about it a little bit. Actually, there is a good, anyway, the question is from, I hope I'm saying the name right. Itai? Itai? Mm-hmm. You know Itai. How do you think about moves translating live? Mix moves, lyric phrases, melodies, etc. I imagine there's not a lot of that in mixing, given that you're going to be delivering stems and an MD is going to be going crazy with stuff.
Is that what he means by live?
I assume so. Translating live.
Translating live.
But also lyric phrases,
shouldn't
melodies,
even be
other things.
I don't think need to be in consideration.
Yeah, that's what I figured the answer was. I mean, what I was going to say on the production end, coming from working a little bit in the Simon Cowell, One Direction, Little Mix world, there's a lot of, it's not really explicitly discussed, but the attitude is like, this is going to play in stadiums in front of tens of thousands of people. Mm-hmm. The snare drum should be huge. The gang vocals should be huge. This should feel like it's best song ever should feel like it's being sung in a stadium, that it is stadium music. So I like thinking, not all the time and not exclusively, but when writing, when producing, where is this music going to play? Is it going to be in the club? Is it going to be, and certainly you'll make translations for that, where it's like you got the low end's got to feel a certain way if it's going to play in the club, but playing live or the gang vocal is going to be huge. I also like thinking of, is this it's like what's the David Foster, he talks about the Whitney Houston, the poof, and he talks about it being the applause moment. He's like, we're going to produce this moment so that when she hits this live, everybody stands up and claps. So I think it's important to think about the context as you don't really want to write for context, although some people do. That does happen.
You can stage those moments for sure. I don't think there's a mix context where that makes sense. If I have to start mixing for the TV track, that's not good.
By the way, there are people who exclusively mix for TV, mix for film, and you just kind of leave it for them. Yeah,
exactly. But we should talk about the fact that if you're going to be playing a 2-track TV track as a rapper or pop star in your early shows on PA systems, then we're mixing completely wrong for that, because you want headroom for the PA. You want stemmed out, and you want someone MDing it so their gain structure hits the PA different. A PA does not want an over-limited loud mix. They want transients. They have their own headroom. They have their own amplifiers that need to be hit a certain way before they distort for clarity. And a great sound person knows how to make that translate. And a great MD will know how to make those stems translate. So what we're doing as mixers right now, limiting and making things loud for whatever reason we're doing it. We can talk about that for months. That's not the best thing for a TV track. So we're clearly not considering the TV performance track when mixing.
Yeah, live stuff is generally things are stemmed out and you have an MD controlling that shit. I think from the songwriting production standpoint, it is interesting to think about that stuff. Like, how is this going to feel live? I'm definitely in with artists and they're like, no, I want to be playing a guitar on the stage here. So I want the guitar to be a certain way. I guess
that's a different thing. That's important. I think you should always consider the performance aspect of the songs you're producing and writing.
And I do, it's not quite as important these days because things are less band oriented, but it used to be much more important for me to see and act live. If I was going to produce an album for a band, Eric Valentine would do this. We went to go see Taking Back Sunday before he agreed to do the album. Like, what does this band actually feel like? What am I trying to, capturing the energy of a live performance used to be a bigger part, but there's still some of that too, where like, what is this going to feel like? How is this going to go hard in front of 10,000 people? So I think those things are good considerations. I guess the last thing I'll say is I cannot wait until there's live Atmos mixes in a club, and then we can really go nuts.
It's already happening.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure Skrillex and Deadmau5 are already on it.
I certainly hope so. Jon, it's always a pleasure, my friend. I love you. I'm glad we can still do this while I'm running around on the road. Thank you guys as always for watching, and I'm gonna go jump on the Discord and see people yell about Atmos a little bit.
Till next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.